Here's a couple questions about recognizing what type of polynomial you have and looking to graph it. In this first one, they want you to graph this. So when you look at it, you have to count up how many factors you have, and the number of factors that you have will be equal to the number of zeros that the graph has. And then from that you can see what it looks like. So here I've got a factor of x minus 2, so the 0 is 2. This one I have an x-intercept of negative 1. But since it's squared, it means a multiplicity of 2, and I'd like to write 2 of them, just to remind myself that there's something that's interesting at that point. And then finally this one gives me an x-intercept of 1. So if I count these up, 1, 2, 3, 4, so there's 4 zeros. So the graph has to have started as an x to the 4th type of graph. Now, to determine what it looks like then, a coordinate graph either looks like this, or it looks like this. It would look this way if it has a positive at the front, and this way if it would have a negative. This one has a negative, so the graph has to look like that. So if I were to just give a quick look of what this graph would look like, the first 0 is a 2, so something happens there. And then at negative 1, there's 2 things that happen there. And then at a positive 1, something happens. So I've got to make it look like this with those points. So at negative 1, since I have a multiplicity of 2, the graph will come up and just bounce back and then go back down. It'll go back down a certain spot, and I could determine what the y-intercept is. But then it'll come back and go through that point, and then through that one and down. So that's what that graph should look like. What was I going to say? Oh, to find the y-intercept, what you could do is just plug a 0 in everywhere you see an x, and then solve for it. So let me do that over here. So I'd get negative 1/2, and then 0 minus 2, 0 plus 1 squared, and 0 minus 1. So this would be a negative 1/2 times, this would be 0. Oh, no. 0 minus 2 is a negative 2. 0 plus 1 is 1 squared. This would be negative 1. Okay, so negative 1 times negative 2 would be a positive 1. And then I still have 1 squared and a negative 1. 1 squared is 1, 1 times 1 is 1, 1 times minus 1 is a minus 1. So that's what my y-intercept is. So that point right there is 0 minus 1, that's the y-intercept. Okay, here's another question that's similar to that. So up here it has the function listed. Let me just write it out again. F of x equals x to the 4th minus 3x cubed plus 12x squared plus x minus 24. And they want to know what that one looks like. So the first thing I would say is you look at this and that x to the 4th, so the graph has to look like this or like this. Since it's a positive x to the 4th, it's going to look like that one. So the ones that I have listed, I only see 3 on this picture, but it can't look like this one because that's upside down. And this one would be a cubic, a negative x cubed. And this one does look like an x squared, but this one could be an x to the 4th too. Or it could be an x to the 6th. Just because it would start high and end high, and something will happen in the middle there. I would probably want the graph to look more like this, so something, like that. But you could have the graph where it could come down and do hardly any kind of shifts like that. And sometimes it's hard to see those, but it might just look like a quadratic. The other thing I'd look for is the y-intercept negative 24. So it looks like they have y-intercept of negative 24. Plausible with that one. Can't really see that, but plausible. It's plausible that it could be negative 24 there. Same thing there. This one, it doesn't look like it's negative 24 there. Could be close, but I'd like to see another graph down there that would look more like that. Okay, hopefully that helps in identifying the type of graph that you have.